Be careful on how you're building whatever it is that you're building, because you may be passionate about it, you may be excited about it, you may be successful at it, but to what end? Are you ever going to be able to be satisfied? Are you ever going to be able to walk away? Are you going to be building it in such a way that you didn't anticipate you wouldn't be able to do certain things outside of whatever that is?
How do you find the will to fight back against a world that wants to keep you sedated, average, and stuck in place? Join us for the tools and strategies you need to create a life of abundance, discipline, and high achievement. This is the Tactical Empire with Jeff Smith.
Welcome to another episode of the Tactical Empire. Today I am joined by none other than Sean Ryder. What's up, man?
Not much. If people are watching this live, I'm in my home office, which has me and my wife's college diplomas, piece of leather artwork from Boone, North Carolina, which I'm excited to hear about your family's trip to Boone coming up. And then if I moved out of the way, it is my father-in-law's desk of when he was a child that my wife recently acquired, that she allowed my 6.5-year-old daughter to paint. She did a fantastic job. It's beautiful. Yes, you know how 6-year-olds paint things. So fantastic.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing.
Have your kids painted anything special in the RV house yet?
No, we don't paint in the RV. No.
I'm assuming not. I know you guys have made some changes to the back end room, but I'm sure you guys, the thing's holding up well. You guys haven't altered anything that is irreversible or broken yet?
No, we've knock on wood, we've had no issues to date. This park that we're in now in North Carolina was dicey getting in here. So it's very mountainy and hilly on the roads in this park. And so if they're not designed correctly, there can be some issues. Like one guy that pulled in here had a rig as big as ours, but a different setup. He had a fifth wheel hitch and I have a gooseneck, and he crunched his bed of his truck with his RV. They taco and buckle on each other if you get them at angles that they can't get in.
I have one of the tenants at my commercial building also has a lot of land in West Virginia. He actually drives like an hour to come into town to his office, maybe an hour and a half, but real small town in Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. I think it's Thomas, West Virginia. And he owns a lot of land, and he turned it into like for lack of a better term, a hippie campsite for Airbnb. And he calls it Brooklyn Heights, and he's cleared out. And it's awesome. It's fantastic. But he posted a picture a week or two ago of someone bringing in a trailer, an RV hitch or whatever, and it fell off the side of the road, and they had to bring in this big tow truck. And then a week later, he posted that the bill that the person received for the tow truck helping was $8,000. Now, he said the guy's insurance covered all of it. So whatever insurance he had was fantastic and covered. I'm sure he had a deductible or something, but $8,000 to pull that thing out of the ditch because he ran off the road.
Yeah, it's not a cheap game. It is not a cheap game, and stuff happens.
Sure. Well, talking about getting stuck, look at this. Look at that segue.
Woo!
We had a recent podcast episode, and I believe it was level 6 of the 7 levels of financial freedom. And within the first 30 seconds, like you said, you had a quote that I actually in the podcast, like I was like, woo, you can hear me in the background. And I posted it to Facebook today, and I've had quite good comments on it. So I don't want to take credit for it. The credit goes to you. Level 6 is about systems, processes. We're not going to talk about that maybe in as depth today for like the 7 levels of financial freedom. That's what that episode was for.
Sure.
But talking to high achievers, it could be your W-2 job, it could be your business, or it could just be like, just for example, right? I've been talking about pickleball. So a high achiever, someone that wants to get really good at pickleball, right? Whatever it is, whatever you're trying to create can actually create its own cage for you. You said everything you create can be its own cage. And like how I took that was, be careful on how you're building whatever it is that you're building, because you may be passionate about it, you may be excited about it, you may be successful at it, but to what end? Are you ever going to be able to be satisfied? Are you ever going to be able to walk away? Are you going to be building it in such a way that you didn't anticipate you wouldn't be able to do certain things outside of whatever that is? I took it that way. There's a few more things I could say about it, but that's what today's episode is going to be. It's going to be about people who may find themselves doing what it is that they love, or something that they thought they loved and now they don't love it and they don't know why. And it may be because they've built themselves into this cage. How do people avoid the cage? How do they know if they're in a cage? So whatever question you want to answer, just expand upon your quote and statement in that episode of building a cage.
Yeah, I think that's just old man wisdom or experience talking. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily old, that you're just aged in the years of building things. Because I don't think I knew this stuff in my 20s and early 30s at all, because I would tell you that I was very dogmatic in my belief of like my idea. And I was like forward facing, I'll run through walls to make this happen, whatever. And now when I think about building things, I take a much more pragmatic like approach to things, in understanding that, hey, the only guarantee in life is that everything is constantly changing. And so what that tells me is, if you're going in to build a business, or you're going in to start a partnership, or you're going in to do something, you have to understand that like the seasons are going to change. Your season of life is going to change. It doesn't mean that you don't have the same passion or believe in what you're building necessarily. You just need to be very careful in how you structure your role and your assignments and your team and your scale, to understand that you want to make sure that you're working in kind of your zone of genius more as much as possible. Like a simple example of this is like when you try to make a certain amount of money, and like what you're trying to do is hit dollar figures, and you're building, I'll be damned if it matters. Like if we need teams or support or anything else, I'm trying to hit this dollar figure, right? And the next thing you look up, and it's great that you hit that dollar figure maybe, but like you're exhausted, you ruined every relationship on the way. It's just not, you're not building anything with any sort of longevity. You're just flaming out. And what I think though is like settling in and understanding that really the reality of life is like, it's really about the process, allows you to understand that you don't have to go so fast on everything. And like, I appreciate moving with a sense of urgency. Like if you know me for 5 minutes, you know I'm very fucking direct, and I don't like wasting time, and I'm not into small talk, and I don't like the whole story. Like I don't need the backstory on 50 things. If I'm here to solve a problem, just tell me the fucking problem so I can solve it. Like that's how I operate. So I don't mind people having a sense of urgency, because I appreciate time and the finite aspect of it. But also I understand that like you do have to have that level of patience to understand where you're at and what you're doing. You see this in business all the time where like, let's use it gym as an example, right? How many people have you seen in your lifetime that started a gym by themselves or with their spouse or whatever, and it was great and fun and awesome, and they built it into mediocre business, and then they had kids, and then everything changed, because then their level of focus and desire to be there physically and pour into it emotionally changed. And they may not have put the infrastructure in place to allow their seasons to change. And so it really just sours your relationship with your business. And I'm just using the gym as an example because we have a background in that. But like any business could say the same thing. We watched some different industries go through similar stuff that I've coached and consulted with. And so it happens in every industry. But I think that as you go through these seasons, especially after you come out of a successful time or even a failure, that's when you really have to be diligent about this. I would say failure even more importantly, because then you're looking to get back on the horse and get that W. And for you, it's super important. Like, would you take that CEO role at this company in the startup because you have to prove to everybody that you're not a failure because you were bankrupt over here at this last business? That's when people get narrow and get the blinders on. And next thing you know, they're 2 years into this business that they've taken all this responsibility in running to build this big business. Maybe it's great, but maybe it's 80 hours a week and they're attached to their phone 24 hours a day. And that's not what they wanted, because now they're ruining their relationships with their kids and their wife and everything else. And it was all because they had to go back and get that W. And so, like, I always tell everybody we talk to that, like, hey, if you're really excited about this idea, I want you to envision it 2 or 3 years down the road, and what's it look like to you? Because if it's still 4 a.m. mornings unlocking the door every day, 6 days a week, and it's still holidays there, and it's still all this other stuff, like, you have to understand run through the worst case scenario in your head. How do we do that? And so I think you need to go in with the end in mind. It's fine to do whatever you want to do, like be the sales guy, be the marketing guy, be whatever you want to do, but you have to insulate yourself in every role that is necessary within that business. So that's why, I mean, I'm big on building org charts. You've seen me do it, where you build an org chart for the business that you desire to have, like your pinnacle business in this industry. So like when you're starting a business, you just think of it that way. How many people belong in that organization? What roles and tasks are there? Who's there to do them right now? You fill in your name is on every single hat on that org chart. Every single square in the org chart is you starting today. And how quickly can you back yourself out of that entire org chart? And then what's it look like operationally from a payroll perspective? Are you going to take on, like, I talk to people all the time that are like, okay, they're switching industries or whatever, and they're like, I want to do this. And you're like, well, you're going to have a $200,000 payroll, like, bi-weekly. Are you comfortable with that? And they're like, absolutely not. And well, I'm like, well, then you can't build this business. It doesn't mean you can't build a business. It just means that you don't want $500,000 worth of payroll a month. Because that's a lot of burden. That's a lot of stress. You have to understand that that's what you're trying to build. Right. And sometimes I've seen people catch fire and their business grows very quickly, and they build something like that accidentally to where they've got $80,000 a month or whatever. Let's just say on the low side, $80,000 a month worth of payroll that they've got to cover. Then the business changes as well emotionally, because you've got a churn rate that you have to meet. And if that's not what you intended on doing when you came to build the business, right? Because I'm just here to serve people, or whatever your original intent was, it's fine. Now the business has to be growing, and your vision for it has to be evolving constantly. But like, some people want to build $100 million businesses, and some people want to build $700,000 businesses that are 95% profit, and both are perfectly fine.
Yeah, I hesitate to respond because all the above happened in my first and longest standing business, that my CrossFit gym that I closed in February. It was like I was in the business a ton. Then I strategically removed myself the way that I wanted to and kept my hands involved only in the aspects that I wanted. And then both micro changes happened. I got married and had kids. And that's when I started pulling myself out. Then macro changes happened, which was COVID. And we were locked down for 72 days and lost 5 years worth of growth. So that was outside of my control. But in order to get that 5 years of growth back, I in my mind, I would have had to go back in to do what I did during those 5 years, because I didn't train my people. My people weren't me. They didn't do things the way I did them, which was fine because I had built this business up to a threshold that was really nice. But once all that profit was removed and we didn't get it back, and to be quite honest, then our payroll was inflated because I wasn't willing to fire anyone, because guess who would have been picking up the stick, right? So like, it's funny that you're using all these examples, and all of these examples ended up putting me in a cage. And it's weird to say that, because like I built it the way I wanted it, but things kept occurring. And it wasn't just one of these things. It was all the things that you're referencing. And so, you know what? I closed that gym down. There were strained relationships that I couldn't salvage, and I wasn't the leader that I wanted to be. It was no longer a product and service that I believed in terms of the fitness space. And then you turn around 6 months later, we're on the verge of opening up a new fitness space. And like, I'm doing exactly what you just said. I'm building out an org chart. I'm building out exactly what each person needs and what that standard is. and I'm visualizing myself in 2 to 3 years. How do I make that not where I'll be in 2 to 3 years, but in 2 to 3 years, I want to be just the leader, the person that shows up for that meeting once a week to make sure everyone else is doing their thing. And I need to do that from day one by hiring correctly, training correctly, having the appropriate standards laid out. And so that's interesting that you're pulling all that up. The one exercise that I liked comes from a book by Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time. And he talks about working through things that make you money and things that you're passionate about. And it's been a while since I talked about that, so I apologize if I say anything incorrectly. But the very first things, if you're finding yourself in a cage, in my opinion, if you want to work through an exercise, the very first things is, are you doing things that you're not passionate about and are not making you money? Those are the things that you immediately remove from your plate and give to someone else that is good at it, that they can get paid for and they're passionate about. So those are things that you're going to delegate, okay? And then you move up this quadrant and you're in things that make money, but you're still not passionate about them. So for me, that was sales. Like sales, I could do a consult and I could generate $1,200 for my another coach at my gym within 15 minutes. I didn't enjoy those things because it required me to drive to the gym, which was a 20-minute drive. It required me to sit and talk to someone about their things for 20, 30 minutes. It required me to get their paperwork, get the information, connect them with a coach, give the coach all. It required things that I actually didn't enjoy. I enjoyed talking to the people. I didn't enjoy everything else that it required. Mm-hmm. So those are things that you're going to replace yourself in. They are things that generate money, but you're not passionate about. And so we talked about the cash flow quadrant the other week in the 7 Levels of Financial Freedom series, where over time you should be doing things that are having other people make money for you or your money makes money for you. This is kind of similar where it's like over time you need to remove yourself from things that don't make money and you're not passionate about. The next thing you remove yourself from, you replace yourself in things that make money but you're not passionate about. And the ultimate way, in my opinion, there's still going to be things that you're frustrated about, but I feel that you won't get caged in if you're efficiently and optimizing your time to play in the right side of the buy back your time quadrants, which are the investment and production quadrants. The investment quadrants are things that aren't necessarily making you money and may never make you money, but you absolutely love doing them. And then the production quadrant are things that you are extremely passionate about, good at, and make you the most money. And that exercise really opened things up for me, especially as I go into this new venture. Is there anything there that stood out for you, or any other exercises that people could put themselves through mentally or on paper to help them remove themselves from the cage or not create the cage in the first place?
I think it's a good exercise on the way into starting a new venture or a business, is making yourself a set of rules that, like, we shall not infringe upon these, meaning like mistakes we've all made as unsophisticated entrepreneurs, whether it's feeding our personal money into the business because it may be struggling or suffering or like in neutral, not going anywhere. And now sometimes that's necessary, but I think based on the evaluations of like what investment are you making from a family standpoint into this particular business, and then what is considered success and what is considered like the line we won't cross. Meaning like I'm over here building wealth for my family, but I'm willing to invest $50,000 in this new venture. And if it can't get legs in a certain amount of time or a certain amount of money invested into it, then we kill it, because I think that's a more sophisticated way to approach certain businesses, rather than like just giving them an unending blank check to like, hey, I'll use my money and the wealth that I should be investing for my family into this thing. Now, granted, businesses take a while to be profitable, but I think you need to understand and set a realistic expectation on the runway to profitability. And I think some people do not do it. We have coached numerous people who have not made money in years. And at some point in time, that is not a good idea. And when I say make money, I mean, you shouldn't be trading your time for free either. And so like a lot of people have convinced themselves that just because it breaks even and they don't have to give it any of their savings account, like that it's actually profitable or making money. And that's not accurate. If you're going and working there for a period of time and you're not getting paid for it or compensated at a rate that you could go out and get a cubicle job for and get paid that, then you shouldn't fucking be in business. And like, that's a hard pill for people to swallow. But like 5 years of your life away from your family to not make any money is not a good idea. Oftentimes we have our ego too wrapped up in things. That's why my wife is a great sounding board for me, because she has the absolute opposite personality as I do. So like when we go in to write rules and things like that, like what does a successful business look like? What is the trajectory and the timeline to do it? Are you committed to that timeline? And be honest. Like, so if this thing, I can't make it profitable in 9 months, then am I going to continue to do it? And then what I usually say is, well, give me 12 then at least. Like, I want that buffer to say, I believe in this, or I wouldn't be doing it and I need to do it. But you also need that person in your corner or that mentor or coach to be like, hey, enough is enough. You can't fucking do this for 6 years and not make any money. I don't care if you only invested $30,000 to start it. You've now invested 6 years of your life in something that doesn't pay you or only pays you below the poverty line. And at some point, those real discussions need to come into play. I'm not trying to be a negative Nelly. I'm just saying that like there's people that you can convince yourself. We are master manipulators with ourselves. So like, especially if we're well off in certain other areas, like if we've got investment portfolios or something kicking off money and like we're trying to make this business successful and we're spending our time on it, you really just have to measure your return on time and understand how important it is. Because there's a certain amount of time you can be willing to put into a startup, but there's also certain expectations you can have of that business and its ability to turn around. And like you've said, and we've talked about it in the last 2 months, maybe 6 months especially, but like just because you shut it down doesn't mean it's a failure on your part. Like it is what it is. Like seasons change. You may not want to be a leader. Like there's a lot of reasons that things can go awry. That's my other piece of advice. Like when we talk about building a cage, I think that really comes to mind for me on your subsequent businesses, not necessarily your very first business, because you don't know what you don't know when you go into it. Yeah, most people end up at some point doing that. But then when you go into your second business is when you're very optimistic about things, or you're coming off that loss I was talking about. And that's when you have to be real careful about like how you're structuring things, where you're at in life. What are you going to be doing? What do the next 3 years look like? What do the next 10 years look like? Like, are your kids growing up? You know me, I talk about this all the time. I am solely focused on my family right now because I believe that I'm going to get a new season business in 12 to 14 years. And my season of business will come back around to where I can focus like crazy on nothing but my wife and my business and where my kids are running around the world at that point in time. But for right now, so like for me, I'm going to look through that level of scope and filter when I go to build something right now.
Yeah, that leads to a question that I had. Can you give anyone a prime detailed example of how you built yourself into a cage before?
Well, I mean, it's either time or money in usually every instance, right? And for me, I was a martyr with my gym business for sure. Meaning I was never flexible with canceling anything. I was never flexible with like missing anything. I was rigidly structured to everything. So like if we had employee issues or we had people calling in or if we had any of this stuff, I would never cancel for any reason. Everything was at the detriment of me and my family to hold on to the structure that I was just really rigid about. Yeah. Like we had a baby one time and I left class, had a baby at the hospital, went back and coached class. We never missed a class. Same day we had babies, I coached multiple classes in a day. That happened multiple times. And so is that a cage necessarily or horrible? No, it's not. But like the other thing that you can do is you can get into debt to where you have to go because you have these loans that you have to service. You know what I mean? So like, that's why, like, if we're talking about venture number 2, you should have a different financial aptitude to how business works by the time you get into these subsequent ventures, whether it's investments or anything like that. And there should be a level of security built into them, meaning like financial security, so it can't like damage you personally or your family. And then also like the time aspect of things. Like, who fills this role if this person doesn't show up in the future? Do you have the payroll to go hire somebody to do that? Or are you going to be the person that shows up to do it?
Yeah, it's interesting because early on, obviously, I mean, I did a lot. I did work at home early on. And then once I crossed that threshold, it was like, enough's enough. Then I started canceling a lot of things. And that was actually at the detriment to the business. It was like, yeah, the guys like, well, we don't have a coach. Well, I'm not coming to coach. So cancel that class for the day. And you know, those things happening once aren't a big deal, but you know, you start not having team meetings, and you know, that was just a reflection on my leadership and not having a leader in place. So it is interesting to learn from these experiences to make sure that those things aren't going to happen again. So all these are learning lessons, guys. Hopefully there was something that you guys could take from this episode to feed off of the quote that everything you're building, even if it's something that you absolutely love and are passionate about, can be its own change. So be aware of when things are feeling really restrictive in your life, when you're feeling you're actually not fulfilling your obligations that are most important to you, especially those of you that have spouses and kids. Make sure you're not building a cage around yourself that separates you from your family. I think that's an important lesson for the younger generation to learn as they come up and hustle hard like they're supposed to in their 20s. I want you to build a life that you can actually take control of your schedule from, not be at the whim of everyone else's time and meetings. Jeff, anything left? If not, send the people out.
Yeah, I mean, it can also be leverage, though. I mean, if you're building a real estate portfolio and things like that, you have to understand your risk tolerance with debt and leveraging debt, and you've got to be pseudo conservative about it. I mean, you want your debt to equity ratio being a conservative number, 50-50, 60-40, something like that, to make sure that you've got a buffer in there so it doesn't become a stressor. Because if you go out and you borrow every bit of money to get into real estate, we talk real estate all the time here, if you over leverage yourself, it can become stressful. It can become a burden on your family. It can become a burden on yourself as well. So like, just be careful about that. This can manifest itself in a variety of ways. It doesn't always have to be a brick and mortar business. It can be something you're trying to build with. I mean, you see it in short-term rentals constantly because people overestimate the income the property's going to make, and then it breaks even or loses money, and you end up having to feed it in today's market with oversaturation or whatever, pseudo oversaturation and lack of demand for these regular properties that people were Airbnb-ing 4 or 5 years ago, no problem. That's something that I mean, how long can your family carry a $2,500 mortgage that's not the house you live in? And so just understand that, like, when I talk about this thing becoming a cage, it can come at you in a variety of ways. And so just think through the processes of what you're trying to build and what you have the emotional bandwidth, financial bandwidth, and time bandwidth to deal with. So there you go. Guys, have a kick-ass week. Join us in the Tactical Empire Facebook community. Ask us any questions there. Our inner circle group is growing. So if you're a man that wants to link up with a bunch of driven dudes and kick ass in Q3, then get in there. We're buying a bunch of stuff, building a bunch of stuff, and supporting each other along the way, having a lot of fun. So talk soon. Sean, thank you. Have a great day.